Good evening, televiewers. You are welcome to this first edition of Prime Hour on my Media Prime TV, an edition that is going to be looking at the ongoing protest actions on the African continent. It started in Kenya, got the guys in Uganda inspired, and today we're talking about Nigeria that has been on the streets at many fronts that caused the president of that nation to address Nigerians yesterday, calling for them to call off the strike actions. We are going to take a listen to the address to Nigerians by the president of that nation, and asking the question why African leadership is failing to deliver, because people take to the streets because they are not happy, they are not contented. In Uganda, they say they are striking against corruption. In Nigeria, they say they are not happy with the way governance is going on, and questioning the reasons for the increase in the prices of basic commodities. What is actually not working for African nations? We are going to be discussing on this with our panelists who are with me in the studio. We have Professor Mac Anthony, who is here. He also now bears the title of an apostle. Good evening.
Always had. Always had.
We are glad to have you.
Thank you. The title of an apostle was the very first ever title I had before even becoming whatsoever I became after. So let me correct that. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening. I want to greet Cameroonians who are watching and Africans who are watching across the continent and in the diaspora. It is a pleasure to be here, and I think us today being here, we have just one intention: to educate, and as well as to share our opinions concerning what is happening around Africa and the way forward. I also want to extend my greetings to the people of Kijom, the Kijom people all over the world, and to my two fonts, Fon Benjamin of Kijom Kuku and Stefani of Kijom Kuchingu.
We also in the company of Mr. Ndiwum Emmanuel, key member of Cameroon Civil Society. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Leo. Good evening to the viewers of Prime Hour. It's a pleasure once more to be here. You will permit me say a hi one to the mayor of Com, who was in Yaoundé yesterday for his maiden visit. After 7 years of being in the throne of Com, that was the first time he actually came out of Com to make such a visit. And the sons and daughters of that land, that beautiful land, are all happy nationwide. We are wishing that one day he will be having another stopover in Douala. That said, I also thank the Com youths all over the world, and especially in Douala, for thinking that they should come together for a solidarity tournament that has once more united all the Com sons and daughters together. As I speak here, I'm one of the participators, and that is why you can be seeing me with a bandage, because we had a very fruitful match yesterday. We are just hoping that in the days ahead, as they have been glamoring, they would like to see my Media Prime around when the semi-finals and the finals are drawing closer. Thank you for having me.
Also with us on this edition of the program is Professor Fohtung Gabila, who is based in South Africa. You've been away for some time. We're glad to have you back. Good evening, Professor.
Thanks so much, Mr. Kum. Good evening to you. Good evening to my fellow panelists and
hello, Professor. Are you getting me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can't get you. Just can you unmute your set? Maybe it's muted.
Let's see.
Okay, yeah, we can get you now.
Okay, no, so I'm saying good evening. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening to my fellow panelists, Prof Mac Anthony and the most esteemed Ndiwum in the studio. It's an honor as always to be with this team of my Media Prime to discuss these very topical issues that we were confronted with as Africans and living through very interesting times. This is a question that we've been asking ourselves repeatedly for the last few decades, and I think that our experience for the last couple of years have taught us quite a few very interesting lessons, which I think that we should unpack and engage in. Personally, I've come from the school of thought that did a lot of bashing of African leaders to the school of thought that appreciates that sometimes it's more complicated than meets the eye, and that as much as we cannot absolve them of their responsibility to lead, sometimes the realities that they are confronted with are much more complex than we can appreciate from outside. So I hope we will be able to discuss this topic in a manner that is going to throw light and be informative to the televiewers and your audience. And ultimately, I hope we can go out of here with a few pointers of what we should be doing at our levels as individual citizens to improve the caliber and the quality of leaders that lead us as Africans. And why not? I hope Prof Mac Anthony is going to lift up his hand to take responsibility to be the difference that we so clamor for.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kum.
Yes, Prof, I'll start the program with you. Protest actually started, if we were to look at what is happening today, started in Kenya and went through for so many days, and we saw many lives that were lost. We also witnessed protest actions in Uganda, and today we are observing same in Nigeria. What is not happening with the young people in the continent? Is it their lack of understanding of the difficulties with which our leaders are manning their respective nations, or it is the clear fact that leadership in Africa has failed?
Well, I think, Mr. Kum, instead of approaching it from what is not happening, I want to approach it from the perspective of the new African youth that makes up active citizenry, the power of social media to mobilize, to get people to be in touch, the power of social media influencers, opinion leaders that are now operating in virtual space. So I think it stands pretty much to the innovation that has happened in the telecommunications and communication space, that it has changed the nature of governance and politics, as it were. I mean, I come back to our own case in Cameroon and what we have been facing since 2018. For the very first time, unlike the 1990s, because of the power of mobilization on social media, leaders faced themselves with a situation where their tactics of governance could no longer be contained or curtailed, because the mobilization was taking place from activists that were sitting in social media space. And it made the classical and tactical repressive mechanisms that were normally unleashed, like what happened in the Great Deferral in 2008, not to be as efficient as had been in the past. So we are victims of our own success in a sense. Technology and innovation have meant that citizens can mobilize, can communicate, can engage, can evaluate leadership from safe spaces. And African leaders that had run regimes that were repressive and oppressive and stifled free speech and speech of all forms have to now adapt to be able to get those spaces. Now, that is the mobilization that took place in Kenya. And we would remember that it is not just starting in Kenya. It is, in a sense, a mirror of what happened in the Arab Springs. It's, in a sense, a mirror of what happened with overthrow of this Sudanese leader, what is his name now? Where there was massive mobilization at the level of social media. So there's a new element, a new factor in the political space that gives activists and actors an opportunity to be able to mobilize on issues. And it's taken the governance landscape on the African continent by storm. And challenging regimes and challenging their approaches to dealing with issues in ways that they had not yet imagined. They have had to develop new tricks in their toolbox to be able to curtail the engagement of the young people. So I would attribute that to innovation in communication and technology. I will attribute that to a new, revived, active citizenry amongst African youth, which is to be celebrated. And I think that the difference of why we are seeing these strikes coming up at the moment is that leadership has not improved. It has not become worse than what it has been in the last couple of decades. I think the citizens have improved. I think the citizens are waking up. I think the citizens are beginning to ask questions. I think the citizens are developing the courage to realize that government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, from the people. I think the citizens are awakening, you know, and the awakening comes from ease of communication on the one hand, but also heightened levels of education, exposed to the rest of the world. And people then, because of how much interconnectedness there exists across the world, can realize that, no, governance in Botswana is better than governance here. Oh, in Rwanda, there's a level of development that is not happening here. Oh, there's a French colony or former French colony called Senegal that is practicing governance. And why not us? You know, so there's a sense in which globalization and interconnectedness of societies is causing people to learn lessons from the experience of other people. And I want to largely give credit to the African youth that are rising and placing more demands from their leaders, and I want to credit that too. As for the leaders themselves, I don't think that they have become better over time. We have had a few examples in the last 5-10 years, Magufuli in Tanzania. People have mixed views about Kagame in Rwanda. And of course, we have now the Sahel nations that are rising to speak on issues of leadership in ways that have not been common for us in the last couple of decades. So we have a couple of very interesting models that are emerging. Lastly, Mr. Kumas, I close on this subject. I think the case of Nigeria, it's somewhat of a belated reaction. Belated reaction in terms of the fact that we could see this coming. We could see this coming when we already had the strikes that happened in Lagos, I think it was sometime last year, which interestingly happened at the time when the current president was just a simple business person, former governor of Lagos. And at the time, he came out in support for the youths to encourage them in the fact that they needed to hold government accountable. And so the taste of his own medicine is coming back to bite him, to the credit of the youths that were mobilized. To realize that the mobilization that they did in the strikes that happened in Lagos a couple of years ago was not in support of him, but was against bad governance and the suffering of the masses of the people. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that across the African continent because the youth of Africa are waking up and they're demanding more from their leader.
Okay, the youths of Africa are waking up and demanding more from their leaders. Were you expecting this wave of protests in 2024, especially when we go through the respective manifestos that are presented to the electorate anytime a leader is coming to power? But when you look at where Africa is today compared with the promises made by all of these leaders, are the youths regretting or they are impatient?
Thank you, Mr. Leo, and I want to also thank Professor Gabila for that contribution he gave. You know, picking up from where he ended, I want to begin by saying that if we have to understand what a protest is all about and understand what leadership is all about, then we will have a reason to find out the agitation of these young people. If we look at what a protest is, from my understanding of what a protest is a kind of a written declaration or an action by a group of people actually to show their negative or positive viewpoint concerning a public issue that has been brought up, and as well as at times when we talk of protests, necessarily must not be negative, because I've seen people carry placards in Cameroon to support ideas that maybe the government brought up, as well as when it comes to showing their negative viewpoint when it comes to injustice, they say, no, we are against this. I think it is something that is okay when we are in a democracy. But we also look at leadership. Leadership should be the ability of a leader through a vision to influence the people, and not just influencing them, to carry them towards that vision, the accomplishment of that vision. So if we have leaders in Africa whom for over a generation, 40 good years and above, I think more than 40, because since 1960s, some of them had been in power, are very unable to give the people what they promised the people. And if a president like the president of Uganda, who has been in power since 1986, gets up to warn protesters from going to the streets and tell them that they will meet repression, that is to make you understand that he has something he's afraid of. I have a vision I've presented to these people in the so-called manifesto, but I've been unable to take them, to give them what they want. And the young people are impatient. First of all, you guys have told them that you are the leaders of tomorrow. The tomorrow came, you remain in power. So now you are struggling to postpone the tomorrow to next tomorrow. And that has become something which is provoking the youths to agitate. And like I said, what Dr. Gabila said concerning that issue of the social media, there's a lot of enlightenment these days. There's more of awareness, there's much awareness these days, which was not in the past. The ability to mobilize people, necessarily not going to them, not writing letters, not going to the streets to talk, but you just see a group of people coming out on the streets. We saw that during the Arab uprising in the Northern Africa, where young people came out in their massive numbers, and it affected the way leadership was done up there, and some governments were overthrown. It happened in Sudan. It happened in Zimbabwe. It happened today. You saw what happened in Kenya. The Kenyan leadership immediately went into action to respond to the demands of the young people. That is democracy. And for me, I want to say that that is what leadership is all about. Protest is not to destroy necessarily. That is why in our constitutions, it is a right of the people to protest. That is why we have international conventions which most of us have, these nations have signed. When you go looking at the 1946 Convention of the Right to Assembly, those are different conventions which the African leaders and nations signed, and adopting them, implying that they are part and parcel, and they will uphold it. So when I see some leaders, because if you look at it, Mr. Leo, when the Kenyan protest started, the president actually warned them, told them they are going to meet with repression. The law is going to work against them. But unfortunately, it led to the death of some individuals, because we have some young military policemen who are very agitative. When they see these young people coming out, instead of accompanying them, like I saw what happened in Nigeria, I think the second day of the protest, where the police came out, these protesters spoke to them. They said, okay, they gave them the way to continue their protest. They didn't react. There were no guns. This youth told them, please hold your triggers. Don't shoot. We are not here to fight against you. We are here to fight for you. Whatsoever we are saying is for you. And that is what it is all about. But when we see protests as something against the government, it means the government itself is having a problem. It means the government itself knows that it is wrong in what it's doing. So you will see them send the same police who are supposed to be there to protect civilians, to protect the public, to go against the same civilians. Protest is a civic right, and it is very normal for people to protest, to tell the government we are not happy with what we are seeing here right now. This is injustice, or this particular law that have been signed is not good for us, because that is what sparked the Kenyan protest. It was a law that was on the table at the parliament, which was tabled by the government, and that particular law was the financial law, which was supposed to create a lot of problems. I think we saw something like that in Cameroon once. But you see, it depends who is leading us. In a place like Kenya, when the people came out, the Kenyan president said, no, I think this needs to be dropped down. There was also a law in Cameroon that came up concerning, I think, mobile phone, something like that. And you were supposed to buy a phone, you pay tax for the phone that you already... It
met with stiff resistance,
and people
and
were
it was
planning
repealed.
to go for protest. The government went ahead to repeal, the president himself repealed that. That was an indication that there's kind of, okay, I feel the pain of the people. We wish that that should be the whole, the way things go. When people rise up, they are not coming because they want to destroy a government. Rather, they have something that is against them. They are suffering, and so they are struggling to express themselves. And that protest is a civil expression of their anger against the injustice or against a particular law. So I think the government in the various nations of Africa, in different nations, we are supposed to not see protest like a crime. It is not supposed to be something that should be seen as a negative aspect of helping the people. If we say we are in a democracy, protest is a part and parcel of leading. And so if you cannot give me that, then you are against me.
Yeah, provided the protest is also peaceful, because I've heard men of God appealing to the guys in Nigeria that, okay, let us come out to express our discontentment, but we should not destroy, because whatever we destroy, our resources are still going to be used to fix them. Now, Ndiwum, what is your reading of what is happening across African states? It is true that the bill was dropped at the level of Kenya. The cabinet was dissolved by the president as a result of it. In Uganda, we saw many young people who came out, they were interviewed, they said they got inspired by what happened in Kenya, and that they are one people. What happens, they feel the same pains, and that across Africa, people are feeling the same. In Nigeria, they say it's because President Bola Tinubu removed the subsidies that now translated in the price hikes of basic commodities across Nigeria. What is your reading of what is happening?
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, before I come to that question, for those who have taken time to look at Tunisia in the days of Bouazizi, who understand that his activities and his repression on the Tunisian people actually inspired the Maghrebian countries to a level where it chained up to the activities of Bouteflika in Algeria, when Bouteflika, you can imagine, on a wheelchair, wanted to impose.
Yeah, but Tunisia at the time, the person who was toppled, who was there for long, was Ben Ali.
Ben Ali.
Yes.
That's the person was talking about.
Yes, thank you for that. We look at the case of Bouteflika on a wheelchair, struggling to impose in Algeria to his people. Then you look at Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, who did all the things that he did, and you realize that the uprisings were not as active as the uprisings we are having today. Yet it came to pass that people came to their brains in those very countries that these people have done it enough, and that enough was enough. You look at the case of Chad, Gabon, where same people took countries to be their fathers' ancestors' tools, their kingdoms, where they were supposed to live there and reign forever like God in heaven. You look at all these things, you discover that African youths have been traveling across the board in the world, and in course of their traveling, it has acted as an eye-opener, because take an African youth in US today, he knows what development is all about. Take an African from Canada, he knows what development is all about. And they'll be asking questions to themselves. Some of these Africans have even been barred the way to come back to their own, to go back to their own native countries as diasporas, as we usually call them. And you discover that a lot of influence have been coming from the African diaspora. Most of them, whom we think are very radical, are people who have seen things in the Western world, in Europe, in America, differently. And they have discovered that what has been happening back home, they have the money, but they cannot permit to put development in their various countries, because the leaders who are sit tight in the chairs in Africa do not mean development. The first problem that we can read as a motivating factor to these youths in Africa rising is the fact that when we look at the rate of corruption in Africa, is not perpetrated by the youth. It is perpetrated by the few old people who are in active services, while the young people are on retirement. Like Prof said a while ago, you keep promising the youth that you are the leaders of tomorrow. When the tomorrow we get to the tomorrow, it is postponed. And then that youth of yesterday remains on the same position. You discover that all of this, and with the rate of the poor governance we have in Africa, you bear with me that even if the tomorrow of the youth was postponed in a way that they were seeing some kind of development, relative development, it wouldn't have pushed them. The main problem with the youth rising, like you talk about the case of Nigeria, even though some school of thought are struggling to play a game that no, President Tinubu inherited a lot of problems from Buhari, which we already knew. For how long has he? I think he has been in the office for 15 months, if my memory is not failing me. 15 months is already 1 year, 3 months. The same problems that the youth thought that as a man of wisdom, as they said it in their various slogans before he came to power in Nigeria, that his wisdom was going to take Nigeria out of all difficulties that affected Buhari's governance. The same problems are still there. He's even multiplying them, which means that if we are talking about price hikes today, it means that yesterday those price hikes were not there, which then gives them a reason to rise up. And it is a spirit that I actually encourage that it should run across all African countries. Every country where the leader has failed to deliver, the youths of that country should have the courage to rise up.
Somebody should they not mobilize around a political party to change leadership?
Mr. Leo, in Nigeria,
he was just voted into office.
Let's take the case of Kenya and Nigeria as our case study. Ruto came to power. It's not been long. It was mobilization from the youth, which was the right of the youth to mobilize and bring him to power.
Yeah, but his case was peculiar because they rose against the tabling of a bill that was going to cause increment. It is because of that unique action that caused them to come.
Let's not isolate the fact that even after he forced that bill to be repealed, they told him to step down.
Yeah, because of that action.
Yes. Considering even Nigeria that we are talking about, when the president came up and said he was removing every subsidy, that is the core. Yeah, that is the core. Yes. Because they are now living the consequences. Yes.
And we understand, in as much as we think that African countries are independent, we are still not financially independent. There's a lot of neo-colonialism still existing in Africa, where some youths, like Professor Ndwum said a while ago, youths have actually come to understand that there are presidents in some African countries that are not put by their people, but they are put by people from the Western world or Europe, and by so doing they pay allegiance to the Western world and not to their own people. I have often said on this platform, The best pact a leader can sign in the world is a pact with his citizens, the people he governs, not a pact with any country in France, America, Germany, Britain, or whatsoever. Because no country in the world can defeat or take a president out of office if his people are against such an action. That is the rule of neo-colonialism. And when the youth actually sit and look at all of this, they see that some of our presidents are puppets. Okay, in the hands of some people. Yeah, so they have to rise up and say no. I know some people will be asking me, why is it that in other French countries in Africa they are not rising up? The fear of repression is one of the causes that people are not aware.
What do you mean by French countries? People are not rising up. In Burkina Faso, we saw people rise up against.
In most French countries, Mr. Leo, we know that the fear of the bullet has made the people.
We saw what happened in Mali. We saw what happened.
We are not denying.
In Senegal.
We are not denying.
Africa.
Yeah, we are not denying. We are saying that. We are not denying. We are saying that if in other countries the fear of the bullet and repression was not alive, the people's spirits would have been alive for them to rise up.
That's true.
Okay. Yes, the fact that there was protest in Nigeria, Kenya, and Uganda gives the impression that things are going so well in other African nations, especially where you live, Professor Gabila. I want us to take a listen to a member of parliament at in your country where you live, South Africa, also address these same problems.
Thank you very much. Greetings to the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF, Julius Sello Malema, EFF officials, commissars, the leaders of the Progressive Caucus, and sympathizers of the revolutionary movement in Africa that turns 11 years old on the 27th of July. To be young is to be in a stage of becoming, of working towards your goals and aspirations to transition from being dependent to independent. However, the youth of this country are perpetual children, and some will never know independence until their old age. At the realization of how doomed we are under your leadership, Mr. President, thousands continue to give in to Nyaupe, and young women and girls amount to bottle girls for you and your friends at the peak of their vibrancy and zeal for life and prosperity. We live with our parents, and finding a 40-year-old man asking his mother for bread is more common than otherwise. This phenomenon is known as the Ramaphosa economy. Joblessness, poverty, and constantly questioning if we are truly the young adults of today. In 2018, Mr. President, you launched the Jobs Summit and promised the youth of this country 275,000 jobs per year. You failed. In 2019, you promised 2 million jobs and an end to hunger, halving of crime, and empowering the school curriculum where a 10-year-old will be able to read for comprehension. You failed. In 2020, you unveiled a 100 billion rand fund to create jobs in the public sector for the youth. You failed. You launched the NSP against GBV and femicide, and 4 years later, on the eve of elections 2024, the murderer of Kirisaleti Elsin Donje was granted bail of 2,000 rands. You failed. In 2021, you spoke about building new cities, and the National Youth Development Agency would fund 1,000 young entrepreneurs in 100 days. You failed. In 2022, plagued by your own failures over the years, you promised the National Youth Service would create a modest 50,000 jobs in its first phase. You failed. In 2023, you came here and praised yourself for the Youth Employment Service that placed 100,000 youth in peace jobs that lasted nothing more than 12 months. Once again, you failed. Yesterday, you came to this house and promised 2 million jobs to the youth of South Africa. It is thus fair and deliberate to then say that this time next year, the result will once again be not achieved and failed. When you became president in 2018, youth unemployment was sitting at 43%. And nearly 7 years into your presidency, youth unemployment currently sits at 45% for individuals aged 15 to 34 and a whopping 59% for young people aged 15 to 24. Your presidency is characterized by many and many promises and many, many failures. It is now apparent that as the youth of today, we must ready ourselves psychologically like the youth of 1976 for the biggest fight against the establishment. The establishment has charged you, Mr. President, at the forefront as the weapon that is formed against us. The youth of today, like Nelson Mandela, who is now hailed as an icon of peace, must be ready to be called terrorists. We must be ready to be called criminals. We must be ready to be jailed for crimes we did not commit. We must be ready to be character assassinated like Idam Dwana, Robert Sobukwe.
I decided to play this because the impression we have is that everything is rosy out there in South Africa. Now, Professor Gabila, how apt is she in presenting these facts in front of the President of South Africa?
Well, Mr. Cook, it's the beauty of democracy in words. It's the beauty of a parliamentary system of democracy that South Africa enjoys. So parliamentary system of democracy that is existing in South Africa, the electoral system functions in such a way that parties are voted into parliament, and then once in parliament, everybody becoming a parliamentarian, the parliamentarians then select one among themselves to become president. And so the president then forms a cabinet as head of the executive, but as a member of parliament, and he's accountable to parliament. Now, the clip that you just showed is an example of the president coming to present and defend his budget, which he does. He has a number of sessions in a year where he must go back and account to parliament as a member of parliament of his governance, his plans, and the management of the executive, and afford an opportunity for all the parliamentarians present in parliament and all the parties present in parliament to ask him questions about various aspects of his program and various aspects of his management and various aspects of his governance. It comes with the system of governance that the people have accepted to submit themselves to. That is parliamentary, that is separation of power, that's a three-tier system, a judiciary that is independent, that holds every member of the country accountable and subjected to the constitution, including the leaders and every single leader, every single politician, and that is not subjected to unusual political influence. There's a sense in which it's the typical Anglo-Saxon conceptualization of governance, the kinds of things that says that as a leader, you are first among a multitude, but you are held accountable. You are a civil servant. You are a servant of the people. And so the people can ask you questions with respect to your governance and your programs and your plans and your performance. Because as president, you are elected and deployed by parliament into the executive, and you go there on a plan, and every now and again you must come back and explain what that plan is. So that's what that's what's going on in that picture. That lady is just one of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 other members of other parties that would come up and ask questions to the president about his governance style. Now, I think it's a sign of a functioning democracy and something that we should all aspire to across the African continent. In other parts of Africa, their conceptualization of governance is different. They do not, most African leaders do not think that they are accountable or answerable to their people. This model functions because they are effective elections that happen on a regular basis. Parties go and seek an electoral mandate from the electorate, which is the population. The population gives them a mandate and gives them a time frame to fulfill that mandate. And after 5 years, they're expected to come back and give an account for how they have used the mandate that they have been given for the last 5 years in order to secure another 5-year mandate. That, in essence, is how elections are supposed to work. And those elections are able to work that way effectively in a country like South Africa because there's the rule of law. There's equality before the law. There's an independent electoral commission that manages the elections. You know, in the last election that just concluded, some of the opposition parties took the president to court. And took the president to court because they said that on the eve of the elections, he gave a presidential speech that was supposed to, in his understanding, the close of his seat administration. He was saying that I am closing this administration, I'm giving a report because I'm about to go to elections. There's no guarantee that I'm going to come back. So I'm giving an account of my administration. But political parties took him to court and says that he used the office of the president to campaign.
Yeah, but you're talking about the democracy prevailing at the level of South Africa. How apt are the things that this lady raised, this MP, raised in her accusations towards the president, the South African president? Because it is shocking for us to also get what she is saying, that the prevalence unemployment rate stood at this time. When you took office, it is moved up to this level. The youths no longer have future. Lots and lots of accusations. How true are these accusations?
Well, those because she's speaking in the public domain, and the things that the statistics that she quotes, it can be verifiable. A lot of those things are factual, right? It's verifiable. Levels of unemployment, levels of despair at the level of the youth. So there's a sense in which it's a material reality of what is happening in South Africa. Whether you would attribute and would blame that exclusively to President Ramaphosa is a different question. Because the question of unemployment, youth unemployment, general unemployment, insecurity, despair of the youth, it's partially a legacy of apartheid, and partially the fact that subsequent governments since 1990 have not done enough to uplift the country. I'm personally of the view that the African National Congress and subsequent governments since Mandela are trying their very level best. The degree of challenges that South Africa is facing as a country, it's not the kind of challenges that can be overcome by one single administration in 5 years. That's just being real. That's being analyzing it from the perspective of an economist. To realize that when you are dealing with a backlog of education, a weakening educational system, collapsing health system, a collapsing infrastructure system, those are not things that with the management of one budgetary cycle you can be able to overcome. You will not overcome 200 years of apartheid and colonialism in a 5 or 10 year term. Now, that is not to give the excuse to the current incumbents to say they should not try. But factually speaking, the kind of challenges that she's making mention of are the challenges that are being faced by the youth in South Africa. The beauty of our presentation is that they are functioning in a system where the president can be taken to task for what he is doing to solve the problems. And he's not going to take it personal. And there's going to be a series of military bees or gendarmes or police waiting for this parliamentarian at the end of the parliamentary session to say that to trash l'autorité, some of the kind of very interesting laws that we have in other countries. So that aspect of the democracy, that aspect of, I want to say, an Anglo-Saxon constitution of governance, it makes governance accountable, it makes it transparent, and you can then have a generation of leaders that realize that they receive a mandate to govern from the people, and they are accountable to the people. That is where I think as Cameroonians we should aspire to get to. Okay. The time where we are at the moment, we have a system that has been captured by an elite who are extremely arrogant. They don't think that they are accountable or owe any explanation to anybody with the way they use state resources. I mean, I was listening to Barrister Keremuna on your program 2 days ago explaining the Glencore scandal. And the Glencore scandal is symptomatic of what happened to the CAN gate, what happened to the COVID gate. Because in essence, we have a group of people who feel entitled to governance. And because they have captured the electoral system and captured the system of voting and captured the parliament and captured the courts and captured every single institution, they feel that they can run the country the way they want. But there's a time frame and the timeline to all of that. It's going to come to an end. It shall not last forever.
Okay.
Because this is things are rising to a greater level of consciousness.
Okay, Prof. Yes, Prof. Thank you for that contribution. But we have seen Honorable Nietzsche actually spit fire at the level of the National Assembly. We've seen Honorable Joshua O.C. We've seen Cabralibi, Honorable Cabralibi also do so. I'm not sure. Gendarmes were sent after him or bees. Yeah, but I don't know. Until you choose. No. Yeah. But you also cannot prove them. Those are speculations that they went after him. Maybe he was just afraid for his life. But now, Prof Mac, I want us to look at this issue, recurrent protest actions across the African. Is it also a call for greater accountability? Because most of them are talking about corruption. Maybe this corruption may just be speculative because there is no transparency and there is no accountability.
True.
Maybe persons may think that 50 billion francs CFA were actually put at the disposal of this when
it didn't happen.
It did not happen. So are they just calling for greater transparency also?
I think that is a measure thing, and that's the base. The truth is, when there is no transparency, there's a lot of darkness, and people who live in darkness do not know when light shines. So when you see a people agitating, is because they are beginning to have indications, yes, that something is not going right in relation to what is supposed to be happening around. When you look at the way Nigeria at the moment is, as compared to the way it was, prices of everything have risen. The economy is collapsing. That is not what the Nigerians were expecting when Tinubu came to power. They knew this is a very wealthy man. He has been a governor. He can be able to manage the nation across. Buhari used to be a soldier. Buhari was not an administrator. He was an economist, or let me put it that way, a businessman.
Yeah, but he's been a president before yes, coming back.
That he was a military president.
Yeah, but
which actually did not. Let's be sincere.
In a better position to manage.
So yeah, because at least he had some experience.
Good.
Yeah.
So we are expecting that the person with the better experience should be able to take the country to a higher dimension. But what is happening? The nation is rather collapsing economically, because that is one of the cries of the young people. There are no jobs and everything is expensive. Life has become so expensive that youths are unable to cope. That is not only a situation that is happening in Nigeria. You just heard the young parliamentarian in South Africa declaring and telling the president you failed in struggling to solve this problem. That is the same situation in Cameroon. Young Cameroonians are unable to feed. Young Cameroonians are going through a lot of situations. And we have seen different situations. We have the Can Gate situation that happened in Cameroon. We don't know how the money went. We don't know how it was managed. We talk about the COVID gate. We are talking about several things. So when we come looking at it, we will say there is something that is not going well. And young Cameroonians, young Africans are fidgeting. They need accountability from their leadership. If you are actually leading and you say you are under a democracy, it is a right of the people to know how you spend the taxpayers' money. It is a right of the people for you to tell them how the money you go and borrow, which will be on their heads, you need to tell them how the money is used. You are not put there. You see, there is nobody who owns that chair, who owns that office. Because I saw a situation that happened recently that caught my attention in Cameroon, and it really made me to feel like something is wrong, where the Secretary of State will call a meeting, somebody will block it. An individual. It is a public owned business. And that gave me, I felt like, wow, something is wrong in this nation. So, Mr. Leo, those things happen like that. And young Cameroonians are watching. They are aware of those things. They are looking at it. In other African nations, you go down to Uganda, as we are talking, they are agitating. Kenya, they are agitating. You go down to different nations, they are agitating. Don't forget, before the Malian people went to the street asking their president to leave, they talk of corruption, Mr. Liu. They needed accountability. They push him out. Before the people of Burkina Faso went out to the streets, they said their government was corrupt. And those things, okay, before Senegal today is having a young president who came up, the former president was under pressure from the people with protest. They protested, went out to the streets, pushed out, said that we need a change. There is corruption. Why is it that we are talking about corruption across Africa? What is wrong? We realize the Glencoe case, there's a situation where there are two different cases that I've seen where it's claimed that Europeans went across 3 different nations to corrupt. The Glencoe situation, you have Ivory Coast, you have Cameroon, you have, I think Nigeria is involved.
They have Congo.
Congo. There is the other one, I've forgotten the name, where you have Cameroon, Nigeria, and Equatorial Guinea. So just imagine that these guys, they leave Europe, they come, they corrupt our leaders, they import corruption into Cameroon, into Africa. Then at the end of the day, we are supposed to face our leaders because we expect that they are supposed to be working for us. And when these young people now say, okay, you people should tell us how you spend the money that these businesses were done with, you see them as being wrong? No, they are not wrong. They don't have jobs. They need jobs. A lot of young people are out there, like the young lady was saying there in South Africa. There are young people who are still living in their father's homes at the age of 30. That is not supposed to be. There are people who have gone to universities. In fact, they came out, they have masters, PhDs. They are still living in their father's houses and expecting their mothers to feed them. Is that supposed to be happening?
Okay.
There is a problem with everything in our defense systems in this continent.
Okay.
And there is need for us to change them, and we need to be accountable. I'm talking to leaders. You need to be accountable. If you have been given an office, it is your right to be accountable to the people. Let them know how you use it. At times you might not even be wrong, but we will blame you because we don't know how you use the money.
Okay,
Prof,
let us.
It's an obligation.
It's an obligation.
Holding a public office gives you an obligation to render account to those under you.
Okay, let us take a listen to Nigeria's president react to the protest action that caught the nation across the states. Let's take a listen.
Nigerians, I speak to you today with a heavy heart and sense of responsibility, aware of turmoil and violent protests unleashed in some of our states. Notably, among the protesters were young Nigerians who desired a better and more progressive country where their dreams, hope, and personal aspiration will be fulfilled. I am especially pained by the loss of lives in Borno, Jigawa, Kano, Kaduna, and other states, the destruction of facilities in some states, and the wanton looting of supermarkets and shops, contrary to the promise of protest organizers that the protests will be peaceful across the country. The destruction of properties set us back as a nation, as scarce resources will be again used to restore them. I commiserate with the families and relations of those who have died and the protests. We must stop further bloodshed, violence, and destruction. As the president of this country, I must ensure public order in line with the constitutional oath to protect the lives and property of every citizen. our government will not stand idly by and allow a few with a clear political agenda to tear this nation apart. Under the circumstances, I hereby enjoin protesters and the organizers to suspend any further protest and create room for dialogue, which I have always acceded to at the slightest opportunity. Nigeria requires all hands on deck and need us all, regardless of age, party, tribe, religion, or other divides, to work together, reshaping our destiny as a nation. For those who have taken undue advantage of this situation to threaten any section of this country, be warned. The law will catch up with you. There is no place for ethnic bigotry or such threats in the Nigeria we seek to build. Our democracy progresses when the constitutional rights of every Nigerian are respected and protected. Our law enforcement agencies should continue to ensure full protection of life and properties of innocent citizens in a responsible manner. My vision for our country is one of a just and prosperous nation where each person may enjoy the peace, freedom, and meaningful livelihood that only democratic good governance can provide. One that is open, transparent, and accountable to the Nigerian people. My dear Nigerians, especially our youth, I have heard you loud and clear. I understand the pain and the frustration that drive these protests, and I want to assure you that our government is committed to listening and addressing the concerns of our citizens. But we must not let violence and destruction tear our nation apart. We must work together to build a brighter future where every Nigerian can live with dignity and prosperity. The task before us is a collective one, and I am leading the charge as your president. A lot of work has gone into stabilizing our economy, and I must stay focused on ensuring that the benefits reach every single Nigerian as we promised. My administration is working very hard to improve and expand our national infrastructure and create more opportunities for our young people. Let nobody misinform and miseducate you about your country or tell you that your government does not care about you. Although there have been many dashed hopes in the past, we are in a new era of renewed hope. We are working hard, and the result will soon be visible and concrete for everyone to see, feel, and enjoy. Let us work together to build a brighter future for ourselves and for generations to come. Let's choose hope over fear, unity over division, and progress over stagnation. The economy is recovering. Please, don't shut out this oxygen. Now that we have been enjoying democratic governance for 25 years, do not let the extremists of enemies of democracy use you to promote an unconstitutional agenda that will set us back on our democratic journey. Forward ever, backward never. In conclusion, security operatives should continue to maintain peace, law, and order in our country, following the necessary Convention on Human Rights, to which Nigeria is a signatory. The safety and
Okay, that was the address that was made yesterday, Sunday, out there in Abuja by His Excellency Bola Tinubu in response to the striking youths that took over the streets of the major cities and states of Nigeria. Your first reaction to it, he says, I have heard you loud and clear. The government is committed to listening to your words.
Okay. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Liu. After listening to President Tinubu, I want to first of all think that it's part of humility in him to have come out to acknowledge that he knows that the youths are involved and engaged in a strike action in his country. Acknowledging that people have lost their lives and extending a message of condolence to the bereaved families equally measures up to the height of humility. We all know that in some countries in Africa, the president would have waited for the 31st of December to come out and make a speech. So coming out at this time shows that whatever the case, he has his people at heart. The only difference is that if somebody listens to his speech, the person will have this feeling that if his speech was to be translated into action, Nigeria will be made heaven
On earth.
On earth. And that is where my worry is, because we live in a continent where it's like there is a school where our presidents are trained how to make very beautiful speeches, very lovely speeches, catching speeches that somebody listening from another country might seek visa to take up the nationality of Cameroon. Yet at the end of the day, they end up not delivering. But I want to think there is another thing again that touched my mind. If he acknowledges that people are being killed, who killed the people? Is it the very security operatives or the security agencies that he's referring to them to continue maintaining peace and order that killed these people, or the people fought within themselves and died? If I were to add something to what I thought he should be telling Nigerians, he would have assured Nigerians that anybody who was killed out of carelessness, the killers will be come to book, will be brought to book, and that those who have lost their lives, as he rightly extend his sympathy to the families, which is but very human. Like I said, he did not wait for 31st of December to come and tell them other lies like others have been doing. But before this video came, I want to equally comment on the video of the young lady in
The MP.
the MP in South Africa.
The youngest MP.
You see her age. I want to tell you in all honesty that only her age alone can tell you that there is bad governance in Africa, and in the bad governance there are some good aspects in the bad governance of other countries that can be copied by other countries, wherein somebody doesn't live and die as a speaker of the National Assembly. I am very sure if this young lady was in the Cameroonian parliament, permit me, that her speech would not have gone to the end, would have been stopped halfway. However, that is courage that is beginning to inspire some of us to think that we can go into the parliament and one day we change things. We know how difficult it is, but I think there is no harm in trying. I might not be the one, but I encourage other youths in my country to take up the battle. I mean, fight for it. That said, Africa has a problem, and that problem is the problem of bad leadership. That problem is the problem of leadership that have been polished by corruption. If you just imagine that in countries in Africa, prices are increasing, while unemployment is on the rise, which puts the citizens at a very tight corner. They cannot meet up with 2 square meals a day. Yet the prices keep skyrocketing. And for a youth, a reasonable youth, I'm not just talking about any youth, because there are still youths in Africa who do not reason, who think that the sit-tight squirrels should remain and die there because they want to go for praise singing and get some crumbs. I'm talking about the youth who still reason in Africa. To sit and take time. At my age, I have 3 children, and those 3 children already have debts that they have to pay that they did not consume. To sit and think in Africa that you go to a particular country, 80% of that country's budget loiters around a particular family because it's a presidential family, and that the president alone, about 70% of the budget of that country is used for the security of an individual to remain and die in power forever. Tell me, what inspiration do African youths still need to rise up across the board everywhere and tell these people it is time you go and rest? Be consultative. Let us take over and continue from where you ended. Because Mr. Lu, like I've always said, any leader.
Bola Tinubu just is 1 year old in power. Ruto is just 2 years old in power.
Yeah, so Tinubu is coming back for the second time.
No. Tinubu has never been president. Ruto just came. The issue here is they want specific issues fixed.
There are specific issues that are supposed to be fixed by the specific people, because for you to become a president, it means that among others you were selected as a specific person. Solve the specific issues. If you cannot solve them, step down. Okay. Bola Tinubu has only 15 months in the office, and it's already some time ago I even saw him falling down, which is not the wish that we want for our presidents to see.
All of us, he tripped. You had an accident. Now look at your hand. Your hand is bandaged because. But you did. There was
it's okay. It's okay, Mr. Leo. But what we are saying is that
everybody does
if
that.
We are to consider his stay in office just 15 months, and we equally consider his age, it means that people have resigned somewhere in Europe barely 6 months in office. What is stopping him from resigning?
Okay, the Nigerians have not said that he should resign. Like they say, they want subsidies to be put back so that they can once again enjoy petrol. Now, Prof Gabila, we just listened there to His Excellency Bola Tinubu of Nigeria addressing Nigerians on what happened or what is happening, calling on them to be responsible. The leaders promised that the protest march were going to be peaceful, but he regrets the fact that lives have been lost, properties are destroyed. I've seen so many vehicles and houses that were actually razed by some of the protesters. Now, he calls on Nigerians that everything should be collective. They should work as one, that he has very good plans. They should just give him some time so that every single Nigerian should benefit from the plans he's set in place. Quite understandable with the President, His Excellency Bola Tinubu.
Well, Mr. I think that President Tinubu has a very difficult country to govern in Nigeria. I think that Nigeria is not an easy country to govern, given the kinds of challenges that it faces as a country. I think that President Tinubu is a victim of a system that he helped build to put in place. Nigeria, like most African countries, are faced with a situation, and that's the source of the protest, and that's why the people in Kenya were protesting. We have a situation where you have elites, the governing elites that are living like royalty, surrounded by the common citizens that are living in misery. So the ruling elites are living in super, sometimes filthily insulting wealth, while they are surrounded and they are governing people who are living in abject poverty, not being able to afford the bare necessity. The tragedy of African governance is the creation of a situation where public office bearers making use of public resources have become entrepreneurs of public resources and have become rich and wealthy, even more wealthy in some instances than the private sector. Any country for which the entrepreneurship is largely driven by state resources, every country for which the governing class is part of the wealthy class, is part of the owners of capital, and it's more wealthy than the private sector on the basis of their access to public resources, it's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for disaster because they forfeit the oversight and accountable role that they're supposed to play in governance and become players and party to roles that are supposed to be handled typically by private enterprise, the private sector. The private sector then is prevented from driving the growth of the economy because capital is sitting in the pocket of office bearers. And not because they were people who are entrepreneurial privately, but because they have used their access to state resources to accumulate wealth, which they do not, for fear of being caught, plow back into the economy to drive the growth of the economy. So they need to take those funds to tax havens. And that is the question in Nigeria. When you see President Tinubu comes and makes a speech of that nature, you're wondering to yourself, is it just one of those other speeches that you would give because you are the president and you need to say something to calm people down? Or are you in any way relating to the reality and the misery of the average person that has gotten them to the point of frustration that they have taken to the streets? The second thing which I want to pick up on that speech, and you touched on it, which is also an African problem, is this notion of using the security cluster to overcome and to compensate for failures in governance in the name of keeping law and order. In other words, you have politicians and political actors that bring in the gendarmes, the police, and the army to mob and to beat and maim and torture civilians when civilians are wanting to hold those in government accountable, which is a violation of their Republican responsibility that they are supposed to owe loyalty to the flag and they're supposed to owe loyalty to the Constitution. I'm watching the comments of the program that we're having at the moment, and some people are saying, I hope that some of these conversations not land some of you in jail. Because as you and I are talking, Mr. Leo, there are members of the security cluster listening to us and waiting to pounce on Prof Anthony or on myself or on Ndiwum for saying something that is supposed to be outrance and authority. In a democratic society where there's supposed to be freedom of speech.
Yeah, but
that is the meeting.
Yeah. Can you focus on the...
excuse me, Mr. Leo, I'm going to wrap up on that. Let me just conclude on that point. I'm saying that President Tinubu adopts the same approach of saying that instead of him focusing on the issues for which Nigerians are in the streets and are striking, he throws in that language that says he cannot sit and allow law and order to not be maintained. And so he instructs the forces of law and order to maintain law and order by all means. That's a classical African line.
Yeah, but
another classic African line is a line that says when people are protesting for genuine reasons, there must be some people tapid and l'ombre with the political agenda trying to manipulate the process. At what point do Africans genuinely go out and say we are discontented about governance without being accused of a political machination? Yeah, but if I do not have means to send my children to school, and I do not have decent roads or decent hospitals or decent health care or decent security, how can I not and why should I not approach my government and those who are elected, hopefully, and put in power and says, I am not happy with your governance. Why must there always be some political machination associated to it.
Prof. President Tinubu says you guys promised to keep the protest peaceful. I'm sure you have seen violent videos of protesters that are destroying vehicles, burning down houses. Should the president just watch that and endorse and clap for them?
Absolutely not.
We have also seen. We have also seen police commissioners in Nigeria who came out and joined the guys who were out on the streets and said, "Please, can we maintain the protest peaceful? We are ready to accompany you guys and then even provide you with water, assist you with first aid, but let us keep it peaceful." Is that not where the crux of the matter is?
That is the language. That's the culture of engagement that we should be engaging with those who are in power. That's a culture of engagement that says when we are discontented, we want a right to protest, as Prof Mac Anthony said. It's an essential fundamental pillar of a democratic system. So if we come out and say we are discontented, the security forces should accompany the process, get the routes that are going to be used, accompany the protesters, and perhaps prepare a specific government official to receive a memorandum. That's how protests are conducted in civilized societies. South Africa is a nation of protests all the time, and that is how they run protests. You do not have the head of police or the commissioner of police or the president himself coming out with a threatening tone that says that we are going to maintain law and order by every possible means. When you do that, you provoke the people to violence. And you have instances where you have in uniform that instead of being Republican participants in the democratic process, take it upon themselves to suppress peaceful protesters. And that is not democracy. So we must find a balance between maintaining law and order, which is supposed to be a prerogative of the security cluster, and creating the space for free democratic participation. The people in the military, the gendarmes, the police, the army, they are sworn to the flag, they are sworn to the constitution, and they are there for the people, not for the people in power.
Okay. Yeah, but the people in power are also part of the people now, except you mean that they are aliens. They're also part of the people. That is why we even have a presidential guard now to take care of, to protect the president, who is an institution. Yes, but
Not be too much now.
Yes.
no, they
Spend to protect the president is not a superhuman being.
That is not even our topic for
Yeah,
today.
no, I'm just a side comment.
Yeah. We are looking at the protests and how do we channel the youth in Africa, the energy that is expressed by the youth across Africa positively, and what does it tell for Africa, for the Africa of tomorrow?
Mr. Leo, if I have to answer that question, I'll begin by saying that first, their energy is positive. So it does not need to be channeled. The only problem is...
Yeah, but when you destroy your property, it is your property now.
You see, this is...
and this is also some properties, especially vehicles that are bought
by civilians.
By some poor people. Yes, so...
Mr. Leo, that is something that no normal person will support. But like it is said, you can't make omelette without breaking eggs. At times you break eggs. So there are some times that when you gather, you know very well that it's supposed to be a peaceful protest. You want everybody to follow the stuff. There are thieves who join the whole thing. And they come in to sabotage the protest. Because to me, I'll be sincere in saying this. Those who did all those criminal activities are sabotagers. Sometimes one might be tempted to even say some government officials paid them and sent them to do it. Sometimes somebody will say, okay, these people do not really, there are people who do not want that this thing should happen, so they needed to use a way to destroy it. So those things do happen. And when they happen, how do we handle them? I think if you understand that the African youth make about 65 to 70% of our different countries in Africa, there is a way to treat them because they are indeed the citizens of that country. If you have a country with close to 65 to 70% youth, then that country is a youthful nation. Who is supposed to be leading them? Youth. Youth, the person who is supposed to be in power should know what they want. And if they come out to say we don't like what is happening, listen to them in the first place. I don't know if there's anybody who received a memorandum from these protesters in Nigeria. But if I can remember, the Kenyan situation is a good example for most leaders to copy. Listen to the protesters. When in Kenya, when I think 3 persons were killed, there was a reaction that came from the government. The vice president directly said the person who is in charge of the security needs to resign. It did not end. The president ended up sacking almost his entire government in order to create a government that will be suiting to the Kenyan people. That is the way you respond to this energy that is coming. Because I'll be sincere in telling you, if the whole of Nigeria comes out youth, there will be nothing, no policeman, no, in fact, there will be no military that will be able to stand them. So it is important that when you see this kind of thing coming, stop, don't bring agitative soldiers or police people to come in front and start. They are trigger happy. Some of them are trigger happy. They are agitative. The moment they just see, they start shooting. It's wrong. Accompany them. Listen to them. Give them part of what they want. At least by doing so, you calm them instead of threatening them like Professor Gabila said. When you tell them, I am going to make sure I keep the law and order is executed to its, what are you doing? Indirectly, you are provoking the young people. You tell them that you want the protest to stop immediately with an immediate effect. You are not the one who called for it. And if you are in power, they actually place you in that seat where you are. And so if they come out and tell you we don't like the way you are handling things, instead of threatening them, listen to them. Give them part of what they want. At least that's a compromise. You give me something and I give you something. If you just drive me away, it means the lives we have lost mean nothing. It means the time we went out meant nothing to you. It is not because you have created a program that you think the program is good for everybody. No. The program of the government must be the program of the people. And if it's not the program of the people, then it's useless. Like I've seen markets taken and built in bushes which have little or nothing to do with the people. I saw a good market that was built in Samalima in Cameroon, which has nothing to do with the people. So the program of the government should be the program of the people, not the program of the government. The government has no program for itself because the president was elected, placed in that seat because he is supposed to govern the nation. And who are those who gave him the right? The people. So when you think of the people first, sincerely, you will not have these problems. But once you think that you have a project for the people, that's when they'll come out and tell you your project is not their project. So listen to them and implement their project, not your own. Your project is not important.
Okay. What do we do to try to contain some of these actions, wave of strike or protest actions that are now raging across Africa or imminent ones? Is it to already tell whosoever would want to be president in Africa to get themselves very prepared to be open? Yeah.
Yes, your last sentence is where, your last word is where we'll start from.
Okay.
It's a sign for those who are aspiring to be future leaders in Africa to know that the African youths of today are no longer the African youths of yesterday. It might interest you to know that there's been a lot of constitutional coup d'etats in Africa perpetrated by those who call themselves presidents and wants to remain and die there forever. To tempt this wave of public manifestation, protest, or violence whatsoever in Africa by the youth, there are some few steps that can be taken and they will work for the favor of the governance and the governed. You see, just imagine that each constitution in Africa is respected 100%. That if a constitution says when a president takes office today, you have to declare your assets. That one will go a long way to solve the problem of corruption or embezzlement that people could imagine. They could just think that maybe they have embezzled this, they have embezzled that. If we try to solve the problem of unemployment in the youth, because whether we like it or not, the youths are of the highest majority, and an idle man is a devil's workshop. A hungry man is an angry man. So when youths are hungry, automatically they become angry. There is no way you can even blame them. Instead of using state funds, state resources for the benefit of very few people in some countries in Africa, we can make it in such a way that the youths are given the plight of place by actually creating unemployment. It is creating employment, gainful employment. It is possible. I say it is possible. Just imagine one minister stealing 70-something billion in a country where the population is not even up to 30 million. Imagine that such money, and the money again is not even saved in his country. They are not even using it to create it, build, set up industries that can help to contain this unemployed youth. And you hear that they are burying the money somewhere in banks out of the country, encouraging capital flight again. Do you think that these youth who have read a lot of books, they have read, they also aspire to drive their beautiful cars, they aspire to get married and be raising their children, they aspire to build houses. All of this put together tells you that anybody aspiring to become a president in Africa should know that the wind of change is happening. It is taking place now. And for you to be a president in Africa, be rest assured that in any country you find yourself, you must have studied the youth situations and problems in that country, and you have what it takes to solve the problem. If you cannot solve youth problems in any country that you find yourself, and you are coming to power as a president, know that you are going to meet your doom very soon. And as we are talking now, from my reading of things, the pace of the protest is still very slow, but something will be cooking in the next 4 years to come in the entire African continent. Any president who stays in power without delivering, because our topic later about president who do not deliver. Any president who dares stay in power for long without delivering, I think the youth will need to rise up and push such a president out of the office. You are a president for the country, and not a president for yourself.
Why are you not pressing for the implementation of strong institutions that will
I started by saying that the state constitutions must be respected 100%. That's what I said, 100%. Because if the constitutions in Africa were all respected, the constitutional coup d'etats that are taking place every day would not have been taking place. And in that guide, it means that the fear of the constitution by the leader will be the beginning of wisdom, and will be the beginning of progress and development for every country in Africa. When a leader takes over, I know that these are my do's and these are my don'ts. And once a leader knows that these are my do's and these are my don'ts, he does not infringe. The do's means what you have to offer. The don'ts don't infringe on the rights of the citizens.
Okay, Prof. Gabila, I just want to plead that just stick to the questions I ask. Don't stray too much. Now, lots of crises in Cameroon and other African nations because, according to the population, the leaders have not delivered. Where is the problem? Is it the inability or the lack of knowledge to manage communities or nations, or the fact that resources are not available? Is it also part of a wastage of our resources, which brings to the fore the place of our economists? We have high-profile economics trained in the best schools across the globe. Why are we not developing as expected compared with other nations that were also colonized, especially in Asia? We saw nations that were colonized, but look at where they are, with the resources they have, and where Africa is today. Is it the fact that our leadership was not trained in the art of management? Is it that we do not know how to manage our resources, or where is the problem?
Okay, from a purely economic perspective, I think that we do have the best leaders trained in the best institutions. Our president is a Sorbonne graduate in terms of political science, and the former president minister of international relations is Sciences Po Paris, Mukoko Mbonjo. I saw his thesis when I went to Sciences Po Paris in the library. And the bulk of our leaders in the top tiers of our government, our prime minister is an extremely educated person. He's an American-trained economist in his own right. African countries like Cameroon, from an economic prosperity perspective, are confronted with a low level, little value addition, little transformation, participation in global production processes. That means that they are at the lower level of the production value chains, and there's very little value addition, so they capture very little in terms of the significance of their products to world markets. We are not industrialized. We are primary exporters of primary products. So we dig minerals out of the ground, we dump them in ships and send them out, whether it be minerals or it be oil. There's very little transformation and very little valorization. And unfortunately, that is the core nature of the characteristics of our economies, which means that we are subject to variations in product prices, global product prices, which means that we're subjected to commodity cycles, as they call them. Why did the rest of the countries in Asia advance? Principally because in their post-independence area, they spent an extensive season of investment, large-scale investment in human capital development, large-scale development in infrastructure building capabilities. In terms of the factors that contribute to the growth of an economy, they are fundamentals for growth. Fundamentals of growth, which is the extent and the depth of human capital development, knowledge intensity. One of the reasons that converts countries like India to take away business from Silicon Valley to become the top point for IT in the world. That is the consequence or the benefit of long-term investment in the training of personnel, human beings. South Korea did the same. Singapore did the same. Most of what we call today Asian tigers did an extensive investment in human capital, an extensive investment in building the kind of infrastructure that makes for competitive economies, and then investment in human capital, investment in infrastructure builds production capabilities. Which production capabilities makes them to be able to produce high-end goods that are exported to the rest of the world, from whence they can accumulate excess capital to continue to improve domestically. So it's an investment period, a learning period, and an innovation period in 3 cycles. If you miss out on the investment period that it takes to build the fundamentals for growth, you will not develop an economy that can get to a point where it can learn or copy from the best of the world. You will not get to an economy that can innovate. Now, most African countries in the 60s, and I think in the context of Cameroon, given the kind of resources that we had under the presidency of President Ahidjo, we reasonably, within the first 2 decades of post-independence, we invested in the fundamentals, taking into consideration the debt burden, taking into consideration the very little that we are accumulating for primary product. We built infrastructure, roads, ports, airports, infrastructure. We had telecommunications. We had basic fundamentals that were being laid as the foundation for an economy that was supposed to bloom and blossom. Now, the challenge with the development of human capital is that it's intensive in the usage of human capital.
We did not have a critical mass of skills. Although our people are very educated, we don't have a critical mass of skills, cause for the skills transfer, which has been the contribution of President Biya's regime, because under him, universities have multiplied. So there's been a sense in which, although the investment in infrastructure, the maintaining of the heritage we received from Aisha has not been sustained on the Biya regime because of the number of those companies that have Tombe Faid, Kamrai, Kamship, and all the infrastructure that was built in cities like Douala, the Biya regime has succeeded to invest at the level of human capital. The challenge of the next administration or the subsequent administration would be to harness the human capital investment that has taken place during the Biya regime for the last 20, 30 odd years, and to channel those into productive sectors. But there is a season of investment again in building structures and infrastructure that are sustainable for growth. That is necessary for the launch and for the success of Cameroon as an economy. That phase still needs to happen. And it will not just be only physical infrastructure, because as it stands, our trade cannot prosper because we don't have infrastructure. We do not have reliable electricity supply. We barely have roads. I mean, that's the one thing that I'm thinking to myself. I ask myself, what can be so difficult in building roads? Douala Port is a connection to all of Central Africa that is landlocked. That is a huge business opportunity. But there's not a reasonable road that goes from Douala to N'Djamena, which would have meant a business opportunity. There's not a reasonable road from Douala to Bangui. There's no reasonable road that goes from Douala to disservice all the landlocked countries that we are surrounded by. That should have been sources for business opportunity. You just need to put a reasonable road and rail infrastructure from the sources, and when I talk about Douala Port, I'm actually thinking about the argument about the deep sea port, to develop the capabilities of Edea and Limbe, and then put the right infrastructure to run from those port areas to disservice the countries of the region. They will come and pay us money for that infrastructure. That is how you build capabilities and accumulate excesses to invest. And in addition to the investment in the development of physical infrastructure that we need to undertake to be able to uplift ourselves as a nation, we need to take it one step further and build strong institutions. Strong institutions that are respectable of the rule of law, where there's equality before the rule of law, because it's important for contracts, it's important for investment. It's important to become a significant investment destination, for you to attract foreign direct investment and multinational companies to come and find the kind of infrastructure. Why are companies going to India? Why are companies going to Asia? They have the educated labor force, they have the infrastructure in terms of rails and road and telecommunications and energy supply, and they have the kinds of rules and regulations in the association countries that attract global firms. Capital goes to where the labor environment has been created. For the time being, we are not doing that. And we have to go from making use of the minimal resources that we do accumulate to be able to build those capabilities in order to become globally competitive. And for us to succeed at doing that, we cannot steal every little thing that we make.
Okay.
Because of the presence of institutions.
Thank you very much, Prof. Gabila. Greetings, Mr. Leo. African leaders have failed by their continuous listening to the dictates of the colonial masters while they give a deaf ear to the plea of their people. They have failed by pushing their citizens to protesting while terming them terrorists, thereby giving the military enough reasons to kill them. They have failed by changing the construction constantly just to maintain power. You meant the constitution, to remain in power, okay, enrich their families and close friends. They have failed, still failing, and will continue to fail because they are not our leaders but representatives of the colonial masters. We never chose them to lead us. They rigged into leadership. Tiku Felix is writing here. But now, let me also say that, okay, he says leadership needs to get prepared for a greater challenge. But let's look at the youths themselves who are protesting. Should they not themselves get more interested, like you suggested, more interested in political issues so that they can handle issues in context of what they are living?
Mr. Leo, I think it is actually time for youths to copy what happened in Senegal. Join political parties. Get into politics and take over the offices if you can. And I want to say this. The truth is, we are not going to start from the top. If you want to actually take control, you begin by taking the various municipal councils. You get into taking the parliament. From the parliament, decisions can be done, and from the parliament, the president can be blocked from carrying on with his plans, if in case you want to make a difference. So if you are a youth, and maybe you have been listening to the slogan that's le politique pour les politiciens et les écoles pour les écoliens, ou c'est quoi, schools for scholars and politics for politicians. There is no man who is a politician. Everybody has the right to become whatever they want to become. Nobody goes to school to remain a scholar. Even if you want to remain a scholar, you have the right to go in for any office. And the anger that a lot of you young people are actually having in your hearts right now, which is bubbling from within and actually creating a state where you feel like you can do beyond. Because a lot of people do not even understand what you are going through. Let me be sincere. Some of them never went through what we are going through because they grew up in an economy which, in fact, you had a country which was so small and it was managed to an extent where people were living better. And even when you were poor, you didn't know you were poor because there were no extravagant usage of the taxpayers' money. There was no overusage of raw materials. They do not know what some of you are going through. You have experienced a surge in technology, an awareness of what is happening around the world in other nations across Asia and across Europe and across the United States. And that has become a pushing factor to want to see change in Africa. Yes, that is a reasonable reason, I'll put it that way, and a reasonable project to step out there and ask for change. That change is what every one of us wants. But the truth is, sitting behind and expecting others to do it for you is where there is a problem. And that is why every time I have the opportunity, in Cameroon, this is August, which we are in already, and there is voters registration that is taking place. And I think that it is time for us to take the opportunity, go massively register, then prepare ourselves. When elections come, we take over. I think that is what happened in Nigeria. If you see Nigerian youths today coming up to say, no, we don't want what is happening, because they first of all went and voted. If you see Kenyans doing the same, they went out, voted, and Ruto came and he's struggling to stand against them, so they said no, and you listen to them. You cannot sit behind and expect change to just come. In Senegal, the Senegalese said, okay, we are going to stand for who we are. We want a young man who understands us, who reasons like us, and they brought them. If you notice, young people have entered into offices in those countries. And I think that in Cameroon, it is not a different thing. We just saw a young lady, the youngest parliamentarian in South Africa. If we want to check very well, that girl should not be more than 25 years old. And she was there pointing it to the president that, look, this is how you have failed. You did not accomplish what you promised the youth. So we need to take the opportunity and get ourselves involved in politics. Don't just be an activist. Be a politician. You see, if you do not do politics, politics is going to do you, as they say. Why? Because when you sit in your home, few people take decisions over your lives. And when they take these decisions, we come to cry. So let us go in. Local governments, I'm talking now to those who have those local governments. We go in, take the local governments, or what we call in Cameroon municipal councils, get there, run it. You get to the parliament, run it. Regional councillors, run it. If we have all this and we are running all these places, we choose our own mayors. We choose the kind of regional presidents we want. We choose the kind of parliamentarians we want that should represent us at the parliament. Let me tell you this. We will not sit here and begin to talk the way we are talking, because we will all be active, doing something to make sure that we experience the change we want. The time for it has come. There is no going back. Let's be sincere about that. There is no going back.
Okay.
You can only move in front, or it will crush you. That's just it.
Thank you very much. Certainly, you have one last word to the African youths watching us across the continent now.
African youths, surely, because they're watching, they've always been watching. I think it is time to actually participate in shaping the continent we want for Africa. And it can be done without being insultive, without being very much violent. When President Tinubu was talking there, he made mention of the fact that you people promised that it was going to be very peaceful. I want to stand on that. You see what has been happening in Cameroon? A lot of people have been asking, why are some of us who are even directly affected are not rising up the same way? I will answer you now before I leave this set. We have been fighting very well, but the problem is that we have chosen a channel to fight that will not be so violent, because it is good to fight for a right cause and live to see the dividends of that cause than to die fighting in the wrong way and disappear without seeing the dividends of that cause. That's the message I have for African youths tonight. It's good to fight for a cause, but let the cause be genuine and let it be fought in the right way. Thank you, Mr. Liu.
Okay, let it be fought in the right way. Thank you for answering to our call tonight, Professor Gabila Fohtung, all the way from South Africa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liu, for having me and for the very spirited engagement we've had. And my appreciation also to the colleagues in the studio, Professor Mac Anthony and Mr. Ndiwum. And I look forward to us being part of the change we desire to see. I am positive that a new generation is rising, a new dawn is rising in Africa, the emergence of a new crop of leaders who are going to work for the well-being of their citizens, and citizens that are going to celebrate good work. A dormant, uninvolved, unchallenged, indifferent citizens are not victims of bad governance. They are accomplices of bad governance. So let's be involved, let's be engaged, as Professor Mac Anthony has said. And good evening to you in the studio, and good night to your audience.
Okay, thank you too for coming, Prof.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. Thank you for permitting us to be here to talk to Cameroonians and to Africans as a whole. I actually will end by saying that the 31st of August will be the end of registration, voters registration. So take the opportunity, rush, go and register before it's the 31st of August. We are supposed to take over this country with the ballot, through the ballot box. That's what I expect.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for coming, Ndiwum.
Mr. Alex, a pleasure. We are always available when the opportunity shows its face. Thank you for having me.
Okay. We're going to be ending at this juncture. Someone watching from Zambia wanted to be part of the program tonight, but we have network issues. I hope that we're going to continue this conversation in the days ahead, and I will surely take these calls from Zambia. We want to thank you all for watching this edition of the program. Thank you to you, Desmond and Eli, Tambe Brian, for supervision. Stay blessed.